Chapter 3. Lost and Found. Now the prince had found the princess, and you might think that they had nothing to do but to go home again. The father and mother of the princess were worrying very much to hear about her. Every day they climbed to the barzatine of the castle and looked across the plain, hoping to see dust on the roof and some brave prince riding back with their daughter. But she never came, and their hair grew gray with sorrow and time. The parents of the other princes, too, who were all asleep under the mushroom, were alarmed about their sons and feared that they had been taken prisoner, or perhaps eaten up by some giant. The Princess Niente and Prince Charming were lingering in the enchanted land, too happy to do the flowers, the brooks, and the fairies. The faithful black beetle often whispered to the prince that it should be time to turn homewards, but the prince paid no more attention to his ally than he had to an earwig. So there, in the magical valley, the prince and princess might be wandering to this day, but for a very sad accident. The night they were married, the princess had said to the prince, "You may now call me Niente, or any pet name you like, but never call me by my real name." "But I don't know it," said the prince. "Do tell me what it is." "Never," said the princess. "You must never seek it to know." "Why not?" said the prince. "Something dreadful will happen," said the princess, "if you ever find out my name and call me by it." And she looked quite as if she could be very angry. Now, ever after this, the prince kept wondering what his wife's real name could be, though he made himself quite unhappy. "Is it Margaret?" he would say. Then he thought the princess was off her guard. Or, "Is it Joan? Or is it Dorothy? It can't be Sybil, can it?" But she would never tell him. Now, one morning the princess awoke very early. She felt so happy that she could not sleep. She lay awake and listened to the birds singing, and then she watched a fairy boy teasing a bird, which sang, so the boy said, out of tune, another fairy baby riding on a fly. At last the princess, who thought the prince was sound asleep, began to croon softly a little song she had made about him and her. She had never told him about the song, partly because she was shy, and partly for another reason. She crooned and hummed to herself. "Oh, hand in hand with Gwendolyn, while yet our locks are gold, we'll fare among the forests green, and through the gardens old. And when, like leaves that lose their green, our gold has turned to gray, then hand in hand with Gwendolyn, we'll fade and pass away." "Oh, Gwendolyn is your name, is it?" said the prince, who had been wide awake and listened to her song. And he began to laugh at having found out her secret, and tried to kiss her. But the princess turned very, very cold, and white like marble, so that the prince began to shiver, and he sat down on a fallen mushroom and hid his face in his hands, and in a moment all his hair vanished, and his splendid clothes, and his gold train, and his crown. He wore a cap of red, common clothes, and he was Prince Comical once more. But the princess arose, and she vanished swiftly away. Opposite, you see the poor prince crying, and the princess vanishing away. Thus he was punished for being curious and prying. It is natural, you will say, that a man should like to call his wife by her name. But the fairies would not allow it. What is more, there are still some nations who will not allow a woman to mention the name of her husband. Well, here in the sad state of things, the princess was lost as much as ever, and Prince Charming turned back to Prince Comical. The black beetle sighed day and night, and mingled his tears with those of the prince, but neither of them knew what to do. They wandered about the magical valley, and though it was just as pretty as ever, it seemed quite ugly and stupid to them. worst of it was that the prince felt so foolish. After winning the greatest good fortune and the dearest bride in the world, he had thrown everything away. He talked about crying. "Oh, oh, Niente, dear Niente, return to your Prince Comical, and all will be forgiven." It is impossible to say what would have happened. Probably the prince would have died of sorrow and hunger, for he ate nothing. If the black beetle had not one day met a bat, who was the favorite charger of Puck. Now, Puck, as all the world knows, is the jester of the court of Fairyland. He can make Oberon and Titania, king and queen, laugh with the tricks he plays, and therefore they love him so much that there's nothing they would not do for him. So the black beetle began to talk about his master, the prince, to the bats. Puck commonly rode. And the bat, a good-natured creature, told the whole story to Puck. Now, Puck was also in a good humor, so he jumped at once on his bat's back and rode off to consult the king and queen of Fairyland. Well, they were sorry for the prince. He had only broken one little fairy law, after all. And they sent Puck back to tell him what he was to do. This was to find the bluebird again, and get the bluebird to guide him to the home of the water fairy, the godmother of the princess. Long and far the prince wandered, and at last he found the bluebird once more. And the bird, very good-naturedly, promised to fly in front of him till he led to the beautiful stream where the water fairy held her court. So they reached it at last, and the bluebird harnessed himself to the chariot of the water fairy, and the chariot was a white cup of a water lily. Then he pulled and pulled the chariot, where he was dragging away the water fairy, till he brought her where the prince was waiting. At first, when she saw him, she was rather angry. "Why did you find out my goddaughter's name?" she said. And the prince had no excuse to make. He only turned red inside. This rather pleased the water fairy. "Do you love the princess so very much?" she said. "Oh, more than all the world," said the prince. "Go back, you, to Mushroom Land, and we'll find her in the old place. But perhaps she will not be pleased to forgive you at first." The prince thought he would chance that, and so he did not say so. He only bowed very low and thanked the water fairy. Then off he set with the bluebird to guide him in search of the Mushroom Land. At long last he reached it, and glad he was to see the little sentinel on the border of the country. Up and down Mushroom Land the prince searched, and at last he saw his own princess, and he rushed up and knelt at her feet and held out his hand to ask pardon for disobeying fairy law. But she was still rather cross. She jumped down and ran around the mushroom, and he ran after her. So he chased her for a minute or two, and at last she laughed and popped up her head over the mushroom, and pursed her lips into a cherry. And then she kissed across the mushroom, and he knew he had won back their princess, and they even felt happier than they had ever been if they had never parted. Journeys end and lovers meeting, and so do stories. The prince has his princess once again, and I can tell you they did not wait long this time. Valley. Off they went, straight home, and the black beetle guided them, flying in a beeline. Just on the farther border of Mushroomland, they came to all the princes, fast asleep. But when the princess drew near, they all awakened, jumped up, and they slapped the fortunate prince on the back, and wished him luck, and cried, "Hello, Comical, old chap, we hardly knew you. Why, you've grown quite handsome." And so he had. He was changed into Prince Charming again. But he was so happy he never noticed it, for he was not conceited. But the princess noticed it, and she loved him all the better. Then they all made a procession, with the black beetle marching at the head. Indeed, they called him the Black Rod now, as he was quite the courtier. So with flags flying and music playing, they returned to the home of the princess. And the king and queen met them at the gates, and fell on the necks of the prince and princess, and kissed them, and laughed, and cried for joy, and kissed them again. You may be sure the old nurse was among the foremost. Her face was quite shining with pleasure, and using longer words than the noblest there. and she admired the prince very much, and was delighted that her girl, as she called the princess, had got such a good husband. So here we leave them, and the country remained always happy, and so it has neither history nor geography. Therefore, you won't find it on any map, nor can you read about it in any book, but this one. Lastly, here's a picture of the prince and princess at home, sitting on a beautiful rose, as a fairy's godchild can do if she so pleases. As to the black beetle, he was appointed to a place about the court, but he never married and he had no children, and there are no other black beetles, consequently, in the country where the prince and princess became king and queen. Erant olim rex quidium heterogena. Tuus. All shadows, as Broad says, in half-forgotten fairy days, there lived a king once and a queen. Few there were, as more have been. And still we love the well-worn phrase, still love to tread the ancient ways, to break the fence, to seize the maze, to see the beauty we have seen. All semstratis. Here's luck to every child that stays in fairyland among the fays, that follows through the forest green, Prince Comical and wonderful, that reads the tales we used to praise, all Tim's shadowless.